All right, we are live. Welcome to the show, folks. My name is Chris. I'm your host. This is the weekly Spinner Rack, where we talk about the latest comics that came out this week, and we talk about the latest comic book news. And oh my God, it's going to be a big week for stuff like that. It's going to be a fun one. I'm already wearing some Christmas sweaters because it's just that time of year. Let's give some shout outs to folks that are in the chat room. We'll just click on some names. Lovely to have you folks here. Really means a lot. Nice, very nice. Like seeing a lot of nice hellos and oh, look at that. Hi, buddy. Hello there. Yo, and hello. A double salute and a hat tip for coffee. Boom, boom. There's two salutes so fast the camera couldn't even catch it. Some coffee. Some people told me they hate that I slurp it by the microphone. So I'll try to do better. It's the least I can do is try. I'll probably fail. But let's see. Top of the show. Let's just do some housekeeping. There's a new Comic Tropes episode that went out this past weekend. Instead of looking at a comic book, it's a little bit of a cheat. I'm looking at a cartoon episode, specifically a Christmas cartoon episode for RoboCop. I had done like about 3 of them before, but hadn't done it in 3 years. And Harry Partridge, who's a friend, terrific animator, and soon to have his first comic book published, had reached out to me and he was like, hey, I love your Christmas episodes. I hope I'm not putting words in his mouth. He said words to that effect and said, like, I would love one. If you do one, I'd love to do a thumbnail for it. And I was like, that sounds fantastic. So no problem. I'll find something. So I found one. I consider it a piece of garbage. And so that was kind of fun to review. You love the sweater. Hey, Jim, it's been a minute since we've seen you. Quite epic. And also I noticed a secret little shout out for our mysterious new project. I'm getting excited, Jim. Who knows exactly what will come out, but Jim started showing up on the show. We started talking a little bit more. Fortunately, he travels the world, so I get to bump into him when I go to Comic Cons. And anyway, we've got an idea for something we want to try in 2024. Hopefully, it's something people respond to. No matter what, I'm positive we will have fun. It seems like it'll be a fun thing. So, going to create one more sort of piece of content out there, and I'm sure that we both are busy enough. But yeah, it's going to be exciting. Thank you for the kind. Wait, the slurps are the reason you tune in. Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be pretty wacky. We will see. But what else? What's it? I was digging through my art supply. Apparently, I had character rotation from that RoboCop animated series. One thing I did not make fun of was the overall quality of the animation or the voice acting. It was standard. It wasn't like exceptional, but it wasn't bad. The writing was really what did it for me. And the fact that the tone was just so radically different than what RoboCop was. And I can understand, like sort of changing, like to a mainstream audience, but to just go from something that's satirizing capitalist consumerist culture and stuff like that, and just has a focus on action and sci-fi concepts, to just being like this thing where RoboCop's trying to defend a mall, I was just like blown away. Tell you what, I think that's all the housekeeping. So I'd love it if you considered checking that out. I think I'm lined up for a special guest on this show next Monday, and I'll leave it at that. Let's add this to the stage. Look at, is it, no, this facing this way? No, this way is right. I'm concerned. Yeah, there's some weird news this week to talk about. This is, there's just so many different types of news on my agenda. And hopefully I can present some of it with some nuance. I would not call it all negative. I would say that there's a lot of interesting things to talk about. So let's start up with this, because honestly, I think that the creator who probably got the most headlines this week and was certainly talked about the most in social media, and talked about other things in social media the most, was Mark Millar. And if there's one thing you can probably all agree on, no matter whether you love or don't care for his writing, you have to admit he's good at publicity and marketing. There are some creators that are just really good at that, right? Stanley, Robert Kirkman, Kevin Smith, people that just like know how to get people to Rob Liefeld. There are people that just always know how to get attention. Todd McFarlane. Anyway, so here's some of what Mark Millar was in the news for. He announced that all of his creator-owned comics are moving from Image over to Dark Horse. And that's a pretty big move. There's some context to that. First of all, I've got this bullet point. I just want to point out, why is this happening? I think not that like any of this is confirmed, but this is what makes sense. Remember, Millar sold his Millar World comics stuff to Netflix back in 2017 for somewhere between $30 to $50 million. So technically, while he creates this stuff, Netflix has the rights to it. And Netflix already uses Dark Horse for pretty much everything. There's Stranger Things comics, and there's other comics that they've both adapted and in turn made new comics based on their shows. So Netflix and Dark Horse already have a relationship. So I think that that's the main reason why this is happening. I don't know why you would otherwise move away from Image. I think Image is just one of the best deals out there. But that's my opinion. That's not a fact. It's just my opinion. Anyway, Millar announced this move on Tuesday on Twitter, and he said he'd be launching 4 new titles in 2024. Also confirmed that he has plans to reprint omnibuses of his material, including stuff like Kingsman. Dark Horse definitely has comics based on Netflix shows. The only one that's popping into my head right now, I know that there's others, but Stranger Things. They produce a lot of Stranger Things stuff. So I think that that's all it is. That's all it is. Golden Knox, pros and cons. What did I miss? Not much. Just starting out, but thanks for jumping in. You agree that it's probably corporate synergy? I think that that's what it is. Millar also mentioned that he went to Dark Horse because he wanted to shake things up, like whenever a prominent comic creator would move from one company to another. Well, just keep in mind that, Mark is going to put spin on stuff to make it more of a news story. He's and I say this piece of it with love and respect. I mean, he's a huckster. He's promoting his own stuff. So I mean, it may not have been fully his decision that, Netflix may have been like, hey, we'd prefer to have this stuff published with Dark Horse or something. But of course, he's going to present it like that. Anyway, what's for dinner? No idea. Oh, but I did have a fun the other night. I like my coworkers at my day job, and I organized a Secret Santa gift exchange. And then one of my coworkers agreed to host it at his house because he's really close to where we all work. And we went out after work last night and did a gift exchange. And I got one of my friends, coworkers, is really into nice food. He doesn't always get it, but he really loves certain things like lobster and filet mignon. He loves it, and I know he doesn't get it all the time. So I drove into the city the other day and picked him up some American Wagyu, high end, really, the top tier steak that you could get. And he said that he liked that. You were asking about dinner, so I had to throw that out there. Factor's really good. I'm not going to lie. I was really happy to get that sponsor. Well, I was happy to get that sponsor. I will say that the company that's organizing it still hasn't paid me. It's been 2 months. It's frustrating. They're slow. They're in touch, but they're slow. All right, I shouldn't say stuff like that. Hi, Jeannie. Lovely to have my sister here. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on with some more news because there's all sorts of interesting stuff. Sort of a little piece of news, but just showing that there's progress here. The Spider-Man Noir TV show has got a showrunner. So, Steve Lightfoot, you may have heard that name before if you watch a lot of TV and pay attention to these things, but let me recap who he is in a sec. He's going to be technically the co-showrunner for the Spider-Man Noir live action series that's being developed at Amazon right now. They're working on Silk with Angela Kang from Walking Dead. She's going to show run that one. And then Steve Lightfoot is going to run the Spider-Man Noir show. Lightfoot ran the Punisher show on Netflix. Kind of a mixed response from me. I liked some of it, didn't like other parts. But he also did work on two really good shows, Hannibal and Narcos. I think that those are pretty fantastic. Look at that. I was wondering how long it would take for the Gordon Lightfoot jokes to come in, and two of them right in a row. Sundown, you better take care. Something, something climbing round my back stair. I don't know how the lyrics go. It's just popped in my head. Gordon Lightfoot. Yeah. Canadian rocker? I think so. Maybe more like folk singer. Hannibal is a stunningly good show for it came out on NBC at a time when NBC, and they still really don't have much of anything, and it was just really well done. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend the Hannibal TV show. But anyway, so that's something else that Gordon Lightfoot. Now I said it. I knew I'd make that mistake. Steve Lightfoot wrote for. Just want to point out, as long as I'm saying co-showrunner, that's because writer Oren Uziel is also going to serve in that role, because he's the one that came up with, the whole pitch and is developing it into the TV show. So yeah, we shall see. We shall see. But that's it. That's all I got. That it's got a showrunner. All right. Black History Month coming up on us real soon, February, and most of the big companies these days try to honor that with, an anthology, or in this case, like variant covers. Kind of something we can count on these days. But sometimes that inspires something cool. For instance, I happen to like this cover, which is why I put the news in here. Marvel's announced that they're going to have 6 variant covers coming out on February 7th. They announced 4 of them. So we've got, and I'm probably going to butcher some of these names, to be fair, but Mateus Manhanini for Captain America #6. Obviously, that has Sam Wilson on the cover. Hernanda Souza is going to do Fantastic Four #17 with a Luke Cage cover. Luke Cage has been a long-time ally of the Fantastic Four. Dotun Akande is doing Black Panther #9 with Black Panther's theoretical sidekick. That was for a variant cover month they did, and Akande did one for Champions, giving New Champions, I think it was that called, and came up with a hypothetical Black Panther sidekick. And finally, we heard that Karen Darbo is going to do Amazing Spider-Man #44 with Rocket Racer. Thank you for the super chat, Steve Sorensen. Too legit to quit. Give this video a like. Help Chris out. Oh, that does help. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, where has Rocket Racer been? There was definitely a period where Marvel needed to calm down on how many black teenage skateboarder superheroes they had, at least according to Dwayne McDuffie. Go to my Dwayne McDuffie episode if you want to hear about that story. But anyway, moving on. Sort of related to Marvel. More just gossip, but there's some truth and stuff behind it. So Ike Perlmutter, guy I don't really like, but a guy who at one point owned Marvel, was the guy who sold it, to Disney, for good or for ill. And he made a power play to take control of Disney that failed. He's trying to take it back. So let's see. So Perlmutter, I just recapped all that. He had a board seat, and he was outed from it this past year because he did what's called a proxy war. He tried to get votes behind somebody else. He does not like being in the public eye, so he tends to put other people out there, fund them, and talk about them and stuff. He, huge supporter of Trump, for instance, humongous. Uh, I thought that his play for taking over Disney was hilariously flawed, to be honest, because he put up an 81-year-old man whose background is in running a catch-up company, Nelson Peltz. Not really a guy who knows lots about entertainment or theme parks or movie studios or anything. So I don't know why that guy seems like, I think it was Hines, not Hunts, just to be clear. I'm pretty sure it's Hines. Anyway, he, he had him like run for you know, the chairman or whatever it's called, and that failed. Bob Iger got reinstalled as Disney's president, and has actually been. He's not a guy that I love, but I think Iger has a better business mind for this stuff. Um, has cut a lot of costs and cut way back on how many MCU films and TV shows are being developed, and I think that that should help the quality of it. But we'll see. We'll see. Um, this past week, all the trade publications for Hollywood, we're talking about this because it affects Disney. So places like Hollywood Reporter are saying that Perlmutter is having Peltz try to get 3 board seats. He wants to sort of eventually get a majority controlling interest in the board that runs Disney and therefore Marvel. Um, and that's because Peltz is still a huge shareholder. So big shareholders carry lots of votes and can try to control a board of directors. Kind of boring business stuff. I'm not trying to get too deep into the weeds with how I describe how it all works because I find that a little boring personally. I don't think this will succeed. I mean, he already failed once. I really don't think as Nelson Peltz gets older, that it's going to get more likely. I don't think Bob Iger is screwing up so badly that the other board members are going to be like, "You're gone." I just don't think it's going to happen. He looks like a gargoyle. Well, let's not talk about anybody's looks. Moving on. Are you excited seeing this? Folks, sectars, biker mice from Mars. This is the stuff we want in our comics, right? I kind of feel like this is a little bit in response to how much buzz there was for a while of Transformers and G.I. Joe coming back. Oh my God, this stuff is hilarious. So, the Nacelle Company. We all know the Nacelle Company. Now, anyway, the Nacelle Company has gathered a bunch of brands to launch the Nacelleverse. And they are going to start with that by launching an anthology comic published through Oni. By the way, just to be clear, one of these things in here, RoboForce, that was an existing thing from the 80s. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is working with Nacelle to adapt that into a new cartoon for Netflix. So, yeah. Here we've got some of this stuff. RoboForce, that was a toy line from 84. Biker Mice from Mars. Pardon me, I hiccuped. 93. Sectars is 1985. And Power Lords, 1983. That said, Nacelleverse #0 is the first thing they're putting out, basically an anthology teaser of these things. Says it's being written by Melinda Flores. She's written some good stuff. I haven't read her Power Rangers stuff, but she's done some stuff with the Radiant Black universe. So she's good. Yes, we're talking about Dwayne Johnson, owner of the XFL. The Centaurians. I remember the Centaurians. Power Lord. I saw those guys open for Priest in 87. If they did a Street Sharks crossover, we'd have to get Vin Diesel back. Have you ever seen Vin Diesel's commercial for Street Sharks? He's like picking up the toys and he goes, "This guy is the toughest Street Shark. He's got jaws of steel." Oh man, that's a good, look that up on YouTube when you get a chance. I wish I had it handy. If I had a producer, I'd just be like, "Hey, cut to that clip. I want to see that. We're going to react to that." Oh, yep. I didn't realize I even put in that typo. I did type, or I meant to type Melissa. It came out as Melinda. Good catch. My Apologies. Said that there's going to be some artists like Diogenes Neves. Good guess, Chris. Francis Portela and others. So, yeah, I don't know that any of these are really like remembered all that fondly. I think that they were. It's not to say that it can't work, but I don't think that there's that much brand love for any of this stuff. I think some of it might just be like, oh yeah, I sort of remember that, or I might have had one of those toys, or I watched that cartoon, but I don't know. That it just amused me to see that they're trying to do such a big push for stuff I would argue is not super well known. Yeah, I sort of remember the Sectars. Well, there you go. That Vin Diesel commercial's how I found out the Street Sharks was a thing. Same with me. Biker Mice was 90s, because that was definitely a response to how well Ninja Turtles did, and that came out like 87 and continued well into the 90s. Silverhawks I think was the same company that did Thundercats, and Thundercats I think has a lot more love and lore and stuff like that. So Thundercats, for instance, is coming out at Dynamite with Declan Shalvey writing. That I can understand there being an audience for. These not as much. So does it mean whoever the Rock voices won't lose a fight? Yeah, allegedly, The Rock has a contract that he cannot lose a fight on screen. He can at best tie. And once you know that and you watch something like, say, Black Adam, you realize like, wow, yeah, he really can't lose a fight. He goes up against that whole Justice Society in the movie, and he sort of fights them to more or less a standstill, and then he just voluntarily decides to go to jail because the script needed him to be sort of locked up for a while, but he wasn't beaten. Yeah. Inhumanoids, I'm pretty sure is Hasbro and Marvel. So like that's owned by somebody bigger. Yeah. We will move on to another fun piece of news. Marvel re-signed Dan Slott to an exclusive. Dan Slott has been with Marvel in one capacity or another for a long time. He announced this past weekend, LA Comic-Con, that he signed to a new 20-year exclusive. I was like, did I read that right? But that's what I read. 20 years. Who even knows what comics will be in 20 years? I have a hard time trying to imagine that. I have a hard time believing in 20 years that this would be the most popular form of comics. I think it'll still be made, but I feel like digital and trade paperback type collections will be much more common in 20 years. I don't see print going away. I mean, people like books, but I don't know. 20 years. Why would they do that? Well, because his books do sell well for Marvel, especially his Spider-Man stuff. His Spider-Man #1 that he did with Mark Bagley, that was Marvel's best-selling book in 22. Spider-Boy #1 looks like it'll probably be their best-selling book for 2023. So yeah. And he did do some work at DC, but he started as an intern at Marvel in the 90s and was writing, like basically anything they'd give him, like, backup stories in the Ren and Stimpy comics and stuff like that, and he took a job or two at, DC and I think Bongo, but he's been at Marvel for a really long time now. What does the exclusive mean? It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do your own creator-owned things, at least not anymore. It means that you're not allowed to work at DC. So like when DC and Marvel sign exclusives, all it means these days is that you won't work at the other competitor, since they're the big two. That's mostly what it means. It also means that you promise to do a certain amount of work for the company per year, as well as usually getting paid a little bit more than if you weren't under an exclusive. So it makes sense. Dan Slott is a Marvel cog in the machine. I don't know if he'd describe himself like that. Obviously, John Byrne did. I don't know but I mean, that's a fair assessment. He's been at Marvel for a long time. He works on a lot of their stuff. But you know what? I do tend to like a lot of his Spider-Man stuff, especially. I think he's a good Spider-Man writer. I really do. I like it. Bongo was a thing for a long time. The Bongo was a thing for a long time. I would say that Spider-Boy is it's a fun book. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it is written at a bit of a younger audience, which is probably a good thing for comics. You know, it's a new character, it's a new number one. It's tied to a popular property. I could see from a business sense that it's a decent idea. I like it. It's a little, I don't want to say campy, but maybe like just a little sillier, a little lighter, certainly in terms of the overall stakes. Not like it lacks stakes. It's got all the Marvel hallmarks, you know, a character that has personal problems and stresses in everyday life impacts them. And, you know, sometimes they get to be a superhero and that's their escape. But yeah, where did I go? There I went. So good for Dan Slott, I guess. Distillery made a splash this year when they launched. New publisher. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Dan Slott's Silver Surfer with Mike Allred. Really good book. That's true. Distillery announced that, you know, it was going to be they would print first and then you could buy digitally. And it isn't like an NFT, but they will only sell a certain number of those digital copies and they will sort of be marked. So like you could basically still collect and trade them, if that makes sense. But it's not like selling a token that represents something. It's literally selling the digital comic with like copyright protection stuff on it. I don't understand it 1,000%. I'm old. But anyway, they launched their digital reader. That's a big part of their company. They launched their digital reader this week. They call it White Dog is the name of their e-reader. There's not a lot to it yet, of course. It's in beta version 0.1, but the company did promise when they launched it, they said that they plan to expand it and have it, you know, go live to the full mobile marketplace, you know, all sorts of different devices, mobile devices specifically I'm talking about, go to mobile devices in 2024. The digital comic reader is currently only on desktops, but it's also a beta. They're making sure it works. I don't believe that it has any blockchain elements to it. I'm pretty sure that that's what makes it sort of like not really an NFT, but I'm not, yeah. Digital rights management, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I can understand why gamers hate it. It does make it, you know, you can't really sell something like back to a store. I don't know if it would work in this regard either, to be honest. I really don't. I sort of appreciate the idea behind it because collecting is a fun part of comics. It's fun. Um, I don't know how much fun it would be to collect a digital version because it wouldn't, first of all, necessarily be hard to hunt for. There's going to be a certain supply, but it wouldn't be necessarily hard to hunt for because it'll just, you know, it'll either be for sale or it won't. The market will dictate the price and it's always going to look the same too. So you're not like, oh, do I want to get, you know, a 7.5 Avengers 300 or should I wait for, you know, maybe I'll come across an 8.5 in a year. I just don't know if it's quite captures the same fun of collecting by creating digital scarcity. I don't know. I don't know. If it does, then that's amazing. I haven't talked to Ed in a little while. I saw, you know, he was in Japan for like I think a full month, maybe even a notch over. He got to meet up with some really interesting people, including guy I really love, Jeff Darrow. That looked fun. I was definitely a little jealous. You know, it was basically as soon as I got home, he was heading out there, and I was like, oh, I miss it already. Collecting is more fun when you can see your collection. I don't know. You know, it's hard. It's hard. There might be people that appreciate this way of collecting. I don't know yet because it's so new that maybe there's stuff I'm not seeing yet. I'm willing to accept that there might be an element of it that I'm not picking up on. It doesn't seem like it doesn't interest me personally, but it's a thing. As long as we're talking about digital readers, and I'll wrap up here just by mentioning that the way they did this was, so they launched this past Wednesday, right? And their book, The Devil's Cut, that's like their anthology that's got teasers for all the different books that they're going to have coming out in 2024. It was $1 on day one. And then on Thursday, that price jumped to $6.66, which is still cheaper than the print copy, I will say. So that's something. But we'll see. We'll see. But I wanted to talk about another somewhat related, another digital reader. And expect to see a bit of this news throughout 2024. Comixology was the big dog. Amazon really kind of botched it and ruined it and is shuttering it and moving everything over to Kindle. But I don't think anybody thinks Kindle is the best way to read comics digitally. So there's a lot of different readers, and IDW announced who their digital reader will be. They announced a partnership with Omnibus. Omnibus is another digital reader that seems to have gotten some good responses. Other publishers that have signed up with Omnibus include Ahoy, Image, Dark Horse, Boom, Humanoids. There's some others that are like, smaller publishers you might not have heard about, but I thought a lot of you will have heard about these. IDW, like, what do they have these days? They've got their Ninja Turtle stuff. They've got their Star Trek stuff. They've got some horror things, Sonic. They've got a few things that are doing well. They used to have a few more licensed properties, but obviously Ninja Turtles has done very well for them in the last year. So that's good. So right now, if you wanted to try this one out, you can go to like omnibus.app. It's also available on, I guess, iPhone and Android. So Omnibus, we'll see if one of these places has to become a leader, but I do appreciate that there's competition. So hopefully we all end up with some good digital readers. I do not mind reading comics digitally. I prefer these, but sometimes I like not having lots of stuff, and I like being able to access stuff when I travel easily. And for my show, I like being able to have like sort of digital versions so that I can like edit more easily than like having to scan stuff. So there's a bunch of reasons why I do like digital comics personally. So I'm curious to see where it goes. I didn't read that. Is it good? The new Rocketeer from IDW is cool. That's cool. That's interesting to me that that ended up at IDW. I know IDW has done a few sort of licensed things with Disney, like sort of Star Wars for all ages. I believe they do, and they got the Rocketeer because I'm pretty sure Disney owns that intellectual property now. Moving on. There's no like happy way to put this, but it's still sweet. Keith Giffen was an important creator who passed away this past October. Last week, I talked about DC Comics having a memorial page for him. Literally both a physically printed page in their comics and a digital page that has tributes from a lot of great creators that worked with Keith Giffen. He created a lot of characters at DC. Didn't create as many characters at Marvel, but he did still do some important work there. So Marvel is honoring him with this page in their books this month. And some of the things they note here is that his first published mainstream artwork for comics was in Marvel Preview, in the first appearance of Rocket Raccoon. So sometimes people are like, looking at who created Rocket Raccoon, and they see like Bill Mantlo and Keith Giffen, and they're like, what? Those are both writers. Well, yeah, but Keith Giffen was an artist as well, and it's because he was the artist of Rocket Raccoon, who obviously has become a popular character. But he also did more than that to elevate the popularity of the Guardians, because remember, Giffen was the guy who wrote the first Annihilation storyline that really created a version of the Guardians of the Galaxy that we recognize today, because that was definitely the team and the look and the ideas that were translated into the movies, which are some of the better Marvel movies. I think a lot of people will agree. I would definitely argue that's that really strong trilogy. In fact, that would be sort of a fun challenge, is saying, like, of the Marvel movies that had at least the MCU movies that had at least three, so that they could form a trilogy. Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers, all of them have gotten up to three. Ant-Man, which had the best trilogy? It, probably Avengers, but I think Captain America and Guardians are in the running for a really solid trilogy. Really solid overall trilogy. Right, yeah, Giffen reimagined Drax. He didn't create that character, but he reimagined Drax, reimagined Star-Lord, uh, did a lot to create the version of the Guardians that we recognize today. You'd vote Guardians of the Galaxy as the best MCU trilogy? Yeah, Avengers had four. A couple of them had four. Thor also had four, obviously, but at least trilogy. Sorry, that I agree. That first Captain America is really solid. I think Winter Soldier is my favorite, but Civil War was also a blast. I mean, that was just amazing. Guardians had some great character work, no question. No question. And it's like with Avengers, I think, like, we'd go like, well, Age of Ultron would probably be the lowest ranked of those four, but that's still an enjoyable adventure film. That's still an enjoyable film. It's not a bad movie. You know what? I kind of agree. I don't know if I loved Quantumania, but I liked it a lot. I liked it okay anyway. I'll, as far as MCU movies that didn't do well, I like the Marvels more than Quantumania, though. And the Marvels obviously is their worst performing one, but I like the Marvels. I thought that was a great movie. Maybe great is overstating it. I thought it was a really good, entertaining movie. I laughed a bunch in it. They've got a joke in it involving space kittens, and it's all set to a popular song from the Cats musical, the Broadway musical. That's funny to me. It was, I don't know, I liked it. Quantumania and Marvels have a lot of different opinions. It's like, yeah, anyway. I'll move on. But Keith Giffen did do a bunch for Marvel, and it's nice that they're honoring him this way. Not every creator necessarily gets something like that, and it's nice. As long as I'm talking, though, about creators that have passed, unfortunately, we lost an important artist this past week, really just the other day. And Ian Gibson may not be as well known as some, but I bet anybody from England knows who I'm talking about. And a lot of people have probably read his stuff and may not remember the name. Let me just acknowledge this. Thank you so much. Did you hear about the Humble Bundles Hellboy bundle? No, I'd love to say that 5 times fast. Humble Bundles are usually a good deal, and I love that it goes to charity. So let me, though, acknowledge Ian Gibson. So he passed away. He was a very popular artist when he worked at 2000 AD. Did some awesome stuff with Judge Dredd. The Ballad of Halo Jones, if you've never read it, is great. Probably an underrated Alan Moore book, Ian Gibson's awesome on that one. Also co-created Robo Hunter with John Wagner and Alan Grant writing that one. Robo Hunter, Sam Slade, just this sarcastic kind of jerk that's really good at killing bad robots. Let's see. I've read The Ballad of Halo Jones in digital form, actually. Yep. Ballad of Halo Jones is quite good. I definitely recommend it if you have not read it. Got to add it to the recommended list. Yeah. It's an interesting epic. I recently saw your video on John Byrne. although he has said a lot of stuff before, but it does make me wonder if he is more of a company man. I mean, I think that like he's the most company man as far as like big superstar artists. Doesn't make him a bad person from just that. It's what he liked to do. He's got a lot of love for those characters. But I think he also sort of is a little locked in to retaining the version that he grew up with and not trying too much that's new. Bothered me a tiny bit, but yeah, anyway. Let's see. His work looks a little graffiti-like in Halo Jones. Great book. Yeah, there's an experimentation to some of Ian Gibson's stuff. You know, that like a little bit of a cartooniness, a little bit of angular lines that just sort of exaggerate things a little bit, but it's not super exaggerated. It's really nice. He really is one of the better 2000 AD artists out there. There's a new color collection or edition for Halo Jones. I guess I didn't realize that, to be honest. I don't think I realized that. Yeah, he's good. He's good. So I thought I'd mention this both because, you know, I respect this artist, but also I feel like not everybody knows about him. And if I was going to point to something for you to read the first time, I'd say read The Ballad of Halo Jones because that's like a complete story you can read. You kind of can't go wrong with Alan Moore, in my opinion. And if you like that, you can spread out to stuff like Judge Dredd, maybe, or Robo Hunter, but also he did do some work in American comics, just to be clear. He did. That was, I think, the only other piece of sad news. So now we're going to talk about awards. Awards! I'm going to talk about comic book related stuff that was mentioned for the Saturn Awards. The Saturn Awards are annual awards put on by I want to say it's the Society for Sci-Fi, Fantasy, and Horror. I think that's the name of the group. It's something close to that anyway. And so like we've got our nominees and some of the stuff I'll mention. They've got a category for Best Superhero Movie. They nominated Quantumania, Wakanda Forever, Blue Beetle, The Flash, Guardians 3. I think out of that, I'd have to vote Guardians 3. The only one that the one in second position would probably have to be Wakanda Forever. I enjoyed Blue Beetle and Quantumania. I'd have a hard time calling it the best of anything. That said, obviously there were some other comic book superhero movies that were fantastic, but they got relegated to a different category. So, Best Animated Film had like a bunch of nominees, including Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and TMNT Mutant Mayhem. If I could put those two in the Best Superhero Movie category, you have a strong contender anyway with both of them against Guardians 3. And I'd probably go with Across the Spider-Verse. I really liked Mutant Mayhem. It would like sort of hurt me to see that not win, but I think I'd have to probably say that Across the Spider-Verse is a slightly better overall movie is all. Anyway, both really, really good movies. Kind of weird that they relegated it to just Best Animated Film, like, because those are both, in my opinion, like put them in the superhero movie category, but whatever. Yeah, I know. There are other comic book movies. You're right. The Killer and Nimona. There was also like for TV, because they do TV stuff, Bodies. Don't know where The Killer or Bodies was. Hold on. Okay, sorry. My camera glitched for a second there. Yep, that is something in its favor. Totally. Mutant Mayhem is complete, but I think Across the Spider-Verse is, I don't know, it's still a very strong movie for what it is. Oh man, yeah, I like Mutant Mayhem is very, very funny. And I like what they did with their art style in it. They were doing something different and it works. It works really well. But yeah, you're right. There are some other comic book stuff. The Killer, I don't know if it would have ended up being nominated for Saturn Awards though, because to be fair, they're talking about sci-fi, fantasy, horror. The Killer is pretty reality based, even though it is based on a comic book. Comic book by one of the same guys that made Snowpiercer, by the way. So, and then there's a third movie that was based on that creator's work. I'm trying to remember. It had Sigourney Weaver. I can't remember the name of it right now. Somebody could probably look it up, but I don't have time. Sorry. Some other stuff. Best superhero TV series. They have Doom Patrol, The Flash, The Sandman, Secret Invasion. Yeah, right. She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, Stargirl, Superman, and Lois. I haven't watched a bunch of these, so I don't know. Literally, what did I see out of this? Sandman, She-Hulk, Secret Invasion are the three here, and I definitely wouldn't call Secret Invasion best of anything. Best at making me disappointed. That was so bad that even though it basically just came out, it seems like the movie The Marvels pretty much knew to ignore it. Like, they didn't really seem to acknowledge anything that happened in that show. Let's see. Hold on. Am I having trouble with my... No. Okay. I did not like The Killer when I first saw it. Then I realized it was a black comedy. Yes. With Fincher satirizing his whole directing style. Way better the second watch. Yes. Definitely has a satire element to it. I mean, it starts off with... Is it a spoiler? No, it's not a spoiler, really. It starts off with the killer methodically, narrating all the things he does to prepare to get, the perfect assassination shot, and it just goes through all this detail for quite a long time, and then he misses. It's it's pretty funny, but it plays it so straight. AI worked really hard on Secret Invasion. I've also heard good things for Superman and Lois. I've heard good things for Doom Patrol. I think out of this, I'd probably have to vote for Sandman, but again, I haven't seen all of it, so I don't know if something like Doom Patrol competes. I'm a little surprised. Nothing against the Flash, but its best days were several seasons ago, right? And Secret Invasion, I think, was pretty uniformly frowned on. So to even include it, it's just include three things if there's only a few good things. Thanks. Fun fact, Matt, the writer for The Killer, made a Black Dahlia comic with David Fincher. Oh, I don't think I read that one. That's interesting. A Black Dahlia. Yes, that's what I was talking about. It's based on a comic, but it's not a sci-fi, horror, or fantasy comic. Are these awards from this year? I didn't know some of these shows are still going. It's from stuff that aired in this past year. And yes, all of these things had episodes, new episodes that came out in the past year. And the last thing I'll just mention is that if I just combine for the sake of ease, Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead, that's 9 nominations for things like Best Actor and Best Show and maybe special effects on some level. So, yeah, Walking Dead still going very strong in a lot of ways on TV. AMC has got to feel lucky that they've got that thing. It's also kind of funny now that I look at this. Best superhero TV series. They're so specific. I don't think you should include The Sandman there. It's a comic book, but that's not a superhero, really. I don't think you could call The Sandman a superhero. I think you've got a category for best fantasy or sci-fi TV series, and Sandman probably should be in there. Even though it's adapted from a comic book, I don't think that it's fair to call that a superhero now that I really look at it. Anyway. They are sort of mixing superhero with comic book, but that's also why I was just arguing that, even though The Killer is really interesting and stuff on Netflix, that it doesn't belong in that category. But I think Bodies should have been on there. Bodies should have been in there. Looking forward to seeing the return of Rick and Michonne. That should be good. They're good actors. People like them. Yeah. You need him to finish up Mindhunter. I don't know if that's going to happen at this point, but who knows? Who knows? My favorite superhero is The Hobbit. That's fair. For me, The Hobbit is my favorite anime. Moving on. That's weird. Okay. Daredevil showrunner debuts a new comic. That's a catchy headline, Chris. I'm talking about Stephen S. DeKnight. Stephen S. DeKnight was the showrunner for season 1 of Daredevil. I would argue the best season. He also ran Spartacus. I think that is an underrated show. It was on Stars. I think Spartacus is legit a really entertaining, good show. I also liked some of the stuff Stephen S. DeKnight wrote for Buffy. He wrote for Smallville in some of its early years. He did direct Pacific Rim 2, but let's not hold that against him. I think he's a creative guy. I think I like his writing. I've always noticed Stephen S. DeKnight. I think I noted him probably on Buffy was when I started to I was like, oh, I like this guy's episodes. Thank you, Joe Dent. Thanks for the animated Christmas special roast, Chris. I've been asking for another roast for years and was real happy to see it. Well, thank you for the super chat. I had so much fun on it that I think I'll try to make it an annual thing. Right. I heard that the live action Yu Yu Hakusho show has debuted on Netflix. I haven't had time to look at it myself. I hope it's good. Oh, yeah. 10 years of Clark Kent learning how to become Superman is quite a lot. Quite a lot. And yet, it's a little campier than sort of what the Arrowverse gave us, but it paved the way for that. There was some weak points, but there were also a few high points. There were some high points in there. Yeah, let's see. Oh, so let me get back to Hard Bargain. Anyway, Stephen S. DeKnight, TV writer, showrunner. He's got a new graphic novel coming out. This one right here. It's called Hard Bargain. It's a noir thriller set back in the 1940s in Los Angeles. Interesting era. Pre-war Los Angeles. It focuses on a private detective named Frank Harding who makes a living hunting down ordinary criminals and clashing with demons. Okay. It said it would also probably involve some of the really touchy race relations that were going on that era, that location. It's definitely a thing. Humanoids is going to publish it. So European company. That's coming out August 2024. Full story. Good for Stephen S. DeKnight for getting into comics. You know, he always had this idea for a sci-fi show that was maybe like tonally and visually a little bit like Halo, but it was like about American, space marine guys or Earth space marine guys, I guess, needing to go up against an alien threat. But the alien threat was like way deep in the universe, in the sense that they'd conquered all these planets. So it was going to sort of be like World War II, the Pacific Theater, where instead of we did island hopping, we'd conquered this small island so that we had a base, and then we could get to the next island and conquer that and send out our planes and boats from that island. And we, move through the Pacific towards Japan. His idea was that's what they should have to do is each season, they're trying to conquer and hold the land of a planet as they get closer to the aliens' homeworld. And I loved that idea. And he announced that ages and ages ago now, over 10 years, I want to say, since it hasn't turned into a TV show. Steven, I know you're watching this show. No, but turn that into a comic. That sounds like a fantastic comic that you could do as a series of miniseries or, trade paperbacks and each, I don't know. It just sounds like a great premise. I really got excited for when he was talking to me about that. I love that idea. We'll see. So I'm going to give this a shot personally because I like Stephen S. DeKnight's writing. This is a tiny piece of news, but Blade is apparently getting a video game. So this past week was the Video Game Awards, and all of a sudden there was a little teaser from Marvel just announcing that there will be an upcoming video game starring the Vampire Hunter, and the people working on it is the only other thing we really know. We've got Bethesda Softworks as, what do you call them? The distributor, the publisher, and Arcane Lion, who did Dishonored, among other games. I know I like Dishonored. They're the ones actually programming it. So Arcane, there was another big game they did that I didn't play. I'm trying to remember. I think it also starts with a D, but it's not coming to my head right now. Speaking of video games, have you seen the trailer for GTA 6? Yeah, I totally. Who didn't see that trailer? I think like within a day, it had something crazy like 100 million views. It was just bonkers how watched that was. That game, the last one, like GTA 5 has won something like it's made many billions of dollars. It's incredibly popular. What I found Deathloop. Thank you, Art of Saw. Yeah, the Arcane did Deathloop. What I found funny about the GTA 6 trailer, honestly, was the response from like the super far right game guys, where they were like getting mad that the main character doesn't seem to be a white guy, and they're complaining that there's black people and Latino women and stuff, and I'm like, but in Grand Theft Auto games, you're a criminal, you're doing crimes, like so. What, you just can't win? Like it either has to be a white guy or it can't be a minority, even though they're doing crimes, which is I think what you would want to say that they do. I don't know. It was just nuts. Like, and I you probably don't want to go down that rabbit hole. If you look up one video, like, because I watched the trailer and all of a sudden the algorithm was like shooting me all these things saying like, oh, do you want more GTA 6 content? And every single one was like, GTA 6 goes woke. And I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. It goes woke. I'm like, I don't know what you want. Plus, it takes place in sort of like a fictional Miami. And there's a lot of Black and Latina people down there. It's so weird. It's so weird. Arcane is perfect for the Blade game. Yeah, I did play the first Dishonored game, and that was pretty darn good. That was pretty darn good. Hopefully it's good. At this point, when I was growing up, there weren't many good superhero video games or comic book video games. There were some really tough and bad ones. We settled for a lot as I was growing up. But now, even if it's not like, you can't call something like the Spider-Man game the same as like the GTA game or the Last of Us game. But it's a good story. It looks good. It plays great. It sets a high bar. Those Batman Arkham Knight games, like superhero games have a high bar to clear now. You can't put out something like Superman 64 anymore and expect people to just buy it on name recognition. You just can't. Marvel versus Capcom, I'm old. So when I say like the superhero games I had to settle for, I'm talking about stuff well before there. I'm talking about on the NES, the X-Men game. That thing was just about impossible to play. The Ninja Turtles game was kind of fun, but it was so hard. Like once you got about halfway through, the Silver Surfer game, the Punisher game, these games were so punishingly hard. So hard. I played this Spider-Man Atari 2600 game. All it did was it sped up. You had to like sling your web and it like sort of went out across. But if you touched a window, it didn't stick and you'd fall and you'd have to try to like latch on again before you hit the ground and you fall fast. That was a hard game. Anyway. Yes. X-Men on the NES, that was a big letdown. It was so bad. And now we sort of know as adults, like, okay, that was made by a company called LJN. And we've got guys like the Angry Video Game Nerd who have definitely taught us that LJN Games was generally a mark of a pretty bad rushed game. But there was no central review source to really pull from back then. You just had to like, it was the roll of a die if you got a good video game on things like Atari and the NES and stuff. There really weren't even like reliable magazines that reviewed everything. Like Nintendo had its own magazine, but that was full of like hints and articles and fan art and stuff. Like there weren't places where you could know if a video game was good or bad. It was word of mouth and it was trying it out. That's why we like rent games from places like Blockbuster. There's nowhere that you can rent a game anymore, is there? There's probably somewhere, but Yeah. It was still pretty hard, though. I would agree that wasn't too bad, but it was still pretty hard. That's why we'd go to Sears and play the games for much longer than they wanted us to. Is Gamefly still a thing? I never tried that one. I don't have time to play too many video games, but I actually did get a video game recently. I got the RoboCop video game. It's not perfect. It's a little glitchy, but it is pretty fun. And it's definitely in the spirit of the RoboCop movie. I liked it. Moving on. Oh, yeah, that's all we know. The Stray Dogs team is reteaming to make a new comic. I'm excited. If you didn't read Stray Dogs, that was a great, great comic. It has a great twist to a murder mystery in it. It's just so good. So Tony Fleeks as writer, Trish Forstner as artist. They've sold nearly 1 million copies of Stray Dogs, and now they've announced that they will reteam for this book called Feral. And I love the idea of what's different here. The story centers on Elsie, Lord Fluffy Britches, and Patch, 3 indoor cats lost in the not-so-great outdoors during a nightmarish rabies outbreak. This is basically a zombie movie, but with cats. Without their humans to protect them, the cats rush to find their way home before they're eaten by the forest full of rabid beasts on their tails. Their survival mantra: don't get bit, don't get scratched, don't become feral. I love it. Stray Dogs, you realize that these dogs, it looks like a Disney thing or something. It looks nice and cuddly and cute, like a Lady and the Tramp. But you realize that these dogs are being collected by a serial killer who kills their owners and then keeps the dogs. But the dogs can't remember like short term for long. They've got sort of vague memories of like having another owner, but it's very hard for them to piece together what exactly is wrong and piece together these clues that are in front of them to figure out the mystery. It's great. It's a little bit of a spoiler, but like the specifics of how it all happens, and I want to hook people. No spoilers. Okay, so people are saying that I'm being too spoilery. I won't go any further then in going where it goes, because it does go into some very interesting places. It's not necessarily depressing. It's not necessarily all depressing. It's a cool murder mystery, like crime thriller, but with dogs. But that was dogs inside dealing with a mystery there. So this one is dealing with indoor animals outside, in the outside world, with external threats, not internal threats. Like the internal threat was like the killer's inside the house with you kind of thing, You did read it, right, Jeansy? I believe I sent you a copy. Anyway, what happened to the cat owners? Why are they outside? It hasn't come out yet. I don't know. No, it doesn't. It's not as violent as Watership Down in a way, because like they don't. Well, I don't want to give too much away. It's not too bad. Anyway, this comes out March 27th, 2024. I'm excited for it. I thought this team did a great thing with Stray Dogs. Really liked that book. I really recommend it. And Feral sounds interesting to me. The idea of sort of turning like rabies and the scary outside world for indoor pets into a type of zombie movie thing where you're just like trying to run for safety. Yeah, that's cool. We shall see. This is pretty big news. Marvel has settled a lawsuit that they had going on from the Steve Ditko estate, from Ditko's brothers and nieces and nephews. So, what was happening? Steve Ditko's heirs have been working with an attorney named Mark Toberoff. You may have heard that name before if you've looked into like sort of lawsuits to do with Marvel and estates trying to get the heirs to things. They were suing to terminate Marvel's copyright on Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Doctor Strange. Ditko's heirs were. Because Ditko actually designed the Iron Man look. Even though he didn't draw that comic, he designed Iron Man. So he had rights to that. Pretty big characters, obviously. Well, this week, both parties, Marvel and Ditko's estate, they filed paperwork to end the court case, and they announced that they have settled out of court. Not a surprise. Details are being quiet, but yeah, Marvel will retain the rights for the characters. Presumably, the Ditko estate is happy with whatever settlement they got. Yes, while Ditko did create characters like Squirrel Girl and Speedball, those were created in the 90s. So the Copyright Act has not, like terminated on or come up yet on those. The ones from the 60s. In 1976, copyright law changed. I forget exactly how long it is, but something. There's a certain amount of time after a copyright has been filed where the people that created it, if they created it with a company, either they or their direct heirs can file to terminate that copyright. But anyway, they've settled out of court. Yeah, the estate got a huge payout. All it's saying is the Ditko estate filed to say, hey, we want the copyright back because that is our legal right now. It is like the timing has like hit. And so we, Marvel had their period of ownership. And now we're going to end that copyright so that we get that back. And they could theoretically like make their own comics or sell it to DC or Netflix or whoever they wanted to. So yeah, Disney wrote a check. Well, they had to. They can try to like argue their case, but it's pretty clear cut. So yeah. Unfortunately, we don't get to know. Will they get some sort of compensation for future reprints? Possibly not. They may have settled for a lump sum, or they may have settled for some sort of private royalties. That will probably never be released. That's between them. You could say no one won, or you could say both won. Marvel gets to keep making these characters. The Ditko estate probably got like a dump truck of money backed up to them. It's not a surprise that this happened. If Marvel lost the rights to Spider-Man, would One More Day be retconned? It wouldn't be addressed. From that point forward, you would never see Spider-Man mentioned again if they lost the rights. It is kind of close to the plot of Chip Zdarsky's Public Domain. Great book if you haven't read it. Really, really interesting. Ditko probably did create Paste Pop Pete, so who knows? That character may have been in there too. Oh, one more piece to this, though. Mark Toberoff, the attorney, is still representing several other estates that sued to terminate copyright at the same time, because basically like a certain number of characters all came out, in that like 1963 or whatever it was when 66, I can't quite remember off the top of my head. 61? Was it 60? It was 61, wasn't it? Anyway, whatever that year was that Marvel published a bunch of their superhero books. So there are still some other estates out there that are filing to, end that copyright and get their rights back. Presumably Marvel will also end up settling with them, but some of them include Larry Lieber, Stan Lee's brother. Larry is still alive. He created Ant-Man. So yeah. Good news, folks. Sean Gunn has a role in his brother's next film. Probably. At least stuff that his brother's overseeing. 1963. Thank you, Rob Irizarry. That was sticking in my mind, 63, but then I started wondering if I was thinking of just Doctor Who, because Doctor Who just had its 60th anniversary. So I guess, if I had to guess, it might be like 60 years is how long a company gets a copyright for. before their estate can file to get it back. Anyway, something like that. So yeah, this will shock you. Deadline reports that Sean Gunn, and that's James Gunn's younger brother, will play DC character Maxwell Lord in future DCU movies. Now, of course, Sean Gunn has done stuff aside from work with his brother, but he's also usually had roles in his brother's movies. The one you'd probably recognize best probably be Kraglin from the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, probably. He was Weasel in the Suicide Squad movie. He's done other stuff. If you ever see the movie The Specials, that's one that James Gunn wrote about superheroes, but it's like sort of the C tier superheroes, and Sean Gunn plays this weird alien in this. Anyway, but yeah, he's going to play Maxwell Lord. Now, one interesting thing is, when the trade publications announced this, The Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, Variety, all of them, they were saying they called Maxwell Lord a villain. And while the comics have used Maxwell Lord as a villain, I mean, he killed Blue Beetle with gunshot to the head. Co-creator J.M. DeMatteis, he tweeted, quote, "Interesting news, but our Max was never a villain. I hope James goes with the Giffen DeMatteis Maguire version." And it's true. When they created him, Maxwell Lord was smarmy and a little slimy and stuff, but he wasn't an outright villain. He was just sort of greedy and was willing to manipulate the Justice League a little bit, but he wasn't a villain. Oh, yes. Most importantly, Sean Gunn played Kurt in Gilmore Girls. I know, Chrissy, you like that show, so that would be the one you know him from best. But yeah, James Gunn posted, calling Maxwell Lord a villain seems reductionist, as he was originally portrayed in JLI, made him one of my favorite characters. And I agree. Whoops, I went too far. Yeah, Maxwell Lord is a more complex character than just calling him a villain. I do think it's interesting that they'd cast Sean there, because he's probably not going to be the main villain, say he was in Wonder Woman 84, but he could be an important ongoing character in the DC universe. He could be a very important character. Here's a piece of news that if you watch any comic book news or you follow comic book stuff on social media platforms like, Twitter, Threads, probably Facebook, YouTube, you may have come across this. This gentleman here is a comic book store owner, actually in my home state of Massachusetts. I'm calling it a rant. It sort of was a rant. It definitely went viral, but it's a little nuanced. I do want to talk about this. So this gentleman is named Glenn O'Leary. He owns the Massachusetts comic book store called Comic Book Palace. I haven't been to it, to be honest. And he was on the Comic Book Palace podcast. He had a viral clip that got shared a lot, especially on Twitter, honestly. Here's a piece of his quote. Okay, I'm going to quote a piece of it that I think is relevant, but I'm not trying to summarize everything he said, but it is relevant. Most of these new writers don't have the love of comics that these old writers had, and all they care about is, how can I put myself into the book? But we don't care about what you would do if you were Iron Man. We don't care about who you are. You're writing Tony Stark. You're not writing yourself in a book. And I'm of two minds of this. There's a part of him that could be right. He is a retailer. This could be what his readers are saying. It sounds a lot like some of the Comicsgate stuff is, but it doesn't mean that all of it is wrong. Thank you, Django Fett. Not everybody beat up on him on social media. I think Gail Simone is pretty even-handed, and she was like, this guy's been running a comic shop for 3 decades. Some of the things that he was saying are valid. So there were a bunch of creators that said yeah, he's got a point to some of this, that, maybe we do need to love the characters a little bit more or something. And then there were other people that I think also had a really good point. Donnie Cates said, like, I love going into a hardware store and having the owner yell at me about how bad the hammers are there. And that's a good point too, because you can have some of these opinions, but you're trying to sell this stuff. So if you carry it, you should find a way to talk up the good elements of it, like as compared to trying to tear it down or get angry about it. And I think that that's just a challenge for a lot of comic shop owners. They almost all were comic book fans at one point, and may not like something. But once you turn it into your business, I think you have to shift some of your perspective there, and start thinking of it a lot more like a business. And that's probably not fun, but you're at that point, you're there to sell a product. You're not there to necessarily criticize it, at least not towards your audience, your customers. You could criticize it to the publishers at, like, meetings and things like that. They have like retailer conferences. Uh, yeah, I know what you mean, Django Fed. Donny Cates was a little snarky, but he had a point too. So I think that there are, I hate to like sort of be middle of the road and say that both sides are equal. Ultimately, I think that this guy should have probably not voiced these concerns in this manner from a business sense. If it's how he feels, there's some truth to it, but it reads to me a lot different when it comes from a reader as compared to a retailer. I think that's just a fact. Like, if any of you out there said something like this, that carries a certain amount of weight. If you say it as a retailer, all of a sudden you're undermining your own business model. It doesn't seem smart to me as a business decision. But that it didn't end there, because this got shared so much that guess who jumped in? Mark Millar. Second piece of Mark Millar news tonight. Mark Millar had him on his YouTube show, Millar Time. But I feel that Mark really used this guy. Used him kind of as a prop. And here, let me explain why I think that. Mark said like that he agreed with him and he loves retailers and stuff. I don't think he's making that up or anything, but he didn't really introduce the guy. He just got into talking to him. He never mentioned the name of the store, so he didn't really plug the guy. It's like a 27-minute conversation, and a lot of it, the way Mark Millar framed it, would just be like he was using him, I think, to back up his own ideas. He'd go like, Glenn, don't you think the big publishers should like alter their royalty payment stuff? That was something he's talked about recently. Glenn, don't you think that Marvel should hire back some of their big name creators to make waves? He wasn't saying like, Glenn, what do you think about this? He'd say, Glenn, don't you think? And he'd sort of give his own opinions. I didn't love how that interview went. I did not find it a very satisfying watch at all. Instead, I was going like, oh, this is all the stuff I work hard when I try to interview someone to not insert myself that much. I want to have a conversation, but you got to give room for the other person to show their opinions, because they're the guest. You're having them there for it's leading the witness. It was totally like all leading the witness. It was driving me nuts. You're welcome to watch it, or maybe you already did, and maybe you think I'm crazy there. Ultimately, I come down with like, I think Glenn had some fair criticisms of some of the writing. I don't think he should have said it as a retailer, but I don't disagree with everything he said. But then when Mark had him on, I feel that he used him as a prop. Personally, I don't feel that Mark was being fair to him. And he may not have realized he was doing that. He may not have, but he did. Here's something crazy he said. He was like, Glenn, don't you think that Marvel should rehire guys like Joss Whedon to make waves? I'm paraphrasing it. That isn't the exact quote or anything. I didn't write it down. Joss Whedon? Really? Not the first name I'd have thought of. Not the first name I'd have thought of. So, pretty bonkers. Pretty bonkers news. as you can imagine, it definitely got pretty political in terms of how people are discussing it on social media. So I didn't comment on it on social media. I'm commenting on it slightly here, but I don't. Um, yeah. I guess I don't have anything else to say. I was just trying to think if there were any points I was missing. We'll move on. I wanted to talk about this, and it's not that I have like a news article per se, but John Cassaday's art got shared on social media, and I was definitely one of the people that was sharing it early on because I came across all the way on the right here. I saw this shared by somebody that was showing previews catalog pages, and I saw this and I was like, is that one of those new Frank Miller pieces? And I look at it, and no, it's an upcoming variant cover for X Force done by John Cassaday. Well, I love John Cassaday's work. I've made episodes about Planetary, and while I wouldn't be talking up Joss Whedon today, I liked Astonishing X-Men when it was coming out. And a big part of it was honestly because of John Cassaday's art. I liked when Marvel and Disney got the Star Wars rights. They launched out with Jason Aaron and John Cassaday, and the first 6 issues of Star Wars just sold like gangbusters. And I'm looking at this piece of art and I go like, this does not look like John Cassaday to me. But there it is in previews, like explicitly saying it's John Cassaday. And there's his signature down here, right? So that's backing it up too. It's not like somebody just shared it online. No, this came from previews. You could go to any of the catalogs where you can order it. And this is the image you will see. Over here on the left is something like that he did with X-Men. He's got a pretty realistic style. But then I started looking, I was like, was there a change? Because he hasn't been doing interiors for like, I don't know, 8, 9 years. He hasn't really done interiors. He's just done a few variant covers. I was like, what have I seen lately? So I look and I've got like this Doctor Strange / Planet of the Apes crossover cover. It was just to promote the Planet of the Apes. It's a variant cover. And I go, oh yeah, that does look like how he, would sometimes draw eyes on like aliens and stuff. And I was like, that's clearly the same way that he drew Beast's Eye here. And then I looked at this recent one. This was done for DC for that recent book, The Outsiders. And look at the perspective on this. I don't mind like the warping too much, but follow this line and it curves back up. Like this top part of the building, he clearly didn't like map out any sort of perspective grid. This is all like freehanded. The character kind of okay, but then he really covers a lot of her body with like this cheat and then just has these vague sort of shadows here. And I'm seeing all this and I'm going like, what am I seeing? What am it's very confusing. And I'm going, okay, still, this all the way on the right, in my opinion, is worse than these two. There seems they're of a kind, and I go, okay, so that's John Cassaday. I misspelled John Cassaday's name in the title. Okay, I can edit that. Let me do that real quick. Oh yeah, thanks. There, I've updated that. That might. Oh, the stream must be. Okay, I can edit that later. Yeah, I've heard. I saw people saying like it can't be Cassaday. It's got to just be a sketch. It's got to be AI. People like were just like, this can't be right. But I think it is. I do think it's him. There's a small possibility that maybe like he did a sketch and then somebody like professionally colored over a really loose sketch just to get this in the previews catalog, the catalog that the retailers are going to order from. I keep saying previews, but it's like whatever, distributors there are have the same thing. So maybe this isn't meant to be the final art. That's possible. But I'll be honest, the thing I worry a little bit about is more just that like, why would they even share that? Like, I I sincerely, I'm like, does he have a health issue or something like that? Because these do not look like his classic work on Planetary, X-Men, Star Wars. It's got enough hallmarks in how he draws details shading, eyes, hair, that I'm like, yeah, it's him, but it looks different. And not for the better. I'm like, is this experimental? I go, I don't think so. I'll be honest. My biggest concern is like, his health and or something like that. And Marvel's and DC are giving him work because he helped them sell so many great comics in the past. But that's wild speculation. I'm not basing that on anything. I'm just trying to come up with an idea in my head of where this makes sense. You're really going in on him. It's not my fave, but it's not horrible. Really? Am I wrong? I saw a lot of commentary. I like John Cassaday's books, so I was really confused. This doesn't look like his work to me. It's got enough like sort of signifiers that I believe it is, but it doesn't look like what I'm used to. I'm surprised. I'm not trying to be mean to the guy, but I am trying to like figure out what's going on and just get like a conversation going. I'd love it if he was able to comment on it because he does have social media profiles. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't want to be mean to him though. I don't want to be mean to him, but this doesn't look good to me at all. The foreshortening is bad. The proportions of like the musculature are bad. This isn't even quite a very accurate like angle on the face. It looks like his teeth are breaking or something like that. I just don't know. I don't know. No artist should get flack. Fair enough. You are not wrong, Chris. It's pretty bad. I feel like there's a difference between good and bad, or like, I don't know. I don't know. John is a good guy. I like him a lot. He's done stellar work in the past. He has. And there's no question. That's part of why I'm confused. He's got to be capable of doing better than this. I don't know. I don't have anything beyond that to say. I am not saying anything bad about his character. I love his work. This does not look right to me. This does not look right, and I would love to understand the story of what's going on behind it. That's all. That's all. I'd love to understand. And again, like I go back and I'm like, there's parts of this Batwoman that are very good, but even like how he did this perspective, it's very off. Maybe he's experimenting. Maybe it's a tight deadline. I don't know. I'll move on to the last piece of news that I have because I want to review a couple comics. Quantumania in the running for an Oscar? Yeah. Variety reported yesterday the top 20 visual effects contenders that have been notified that they're going to make it onto the next stage where they vote, I think, down to 10 10 contenders for best visual special effects of the year. Included Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. Now, I enjoyed the movie okay, but I did not think all the special effects were good. First of all, it really looked like a lot of what was done was filmed on that volume thing. There was just sort of like a flatness I felt once everybody made it to the quantum realm. I didn't feel like they were really standing in an environment of any kind. It looked different than even just sort of like when you're green screening, like, like some real depth to something. It felt strange to me. So it felt strangely flat. And I did not love their design for MODOK. It really felt like they just face mapped Corey Stoll really quickly onto this. Maybe they didn't have time. I don't know. But this one was nominated. So not nominated, in the running to be nominated in the top 20, there were some other really cool ones too. Like, Barbie had an interesting look. Barbie got nominated. The new Godzilla -1, that movie's fantastic, by the way. That got nominated. I feel like, that just looks incredible. But I also wanted to point out, not included, Oppenheimer. And a bunch of people will say, well, Oppenheimer did tons of stuff, like literally in camera. They exploded a massive bomb. That wasn't a CGI bomb. And I go, fair. That doesn't mean that it didn't have VFX, because it absolutely did. They didn't have lots, but they did have stuff to it. And and I'd say it's good because you're looking at the movie and it doesn't look like VFX, but they did use VFX. So I feel like that's a movie that might deserve a nomination, but maybe it's because they didn't have enough. Maybe they didn't have enough that like people felt it was worth nominating them. But I was a little surprised. Tell you what, let's talk comics. Let's talk about the comics that came out this week. I am turning on another camera over here, and I'm going to show you. I didn't pick up a ton of stuff this week, but I did pick up some entertaining stuff. I'm going to close that out. Hello. And I'm going to add a camera. Where is that? There it is. Going to zoom in a little. You guys don't need to see my coffee, really. I'll add that and do that. There we go. Let me move it over a little bit more. So it's on the top. Let's talk about one that I just thought looked fun. You guys have heard me talk up Daniel Warren Johnson. You know, I'm a fan of what I'm a fan of, but I want to point out part of why I'm a fan. And some of it is how well he frames and builds up certain action. Okay. Because I can look at this and go like, oh, okay, cool. You know, cool kick. That's nice. You know, it's clear what's going on page to page. That's good. But what I like is that, you know, he'll build up tension with certain things. He also does some fun foreshortening and some fun effects to just imply motion with like sketchy lines up close. Plus, the fact that he's drawing mechanical beings and Daniel doesn't feel the need to like make super like rigid lines, I that's brave in my opinion. Like, you know, he makes it a little round and goes for motion and action over realism. Well, look at this 2-page spread. Optimus Prime coming in, hitting Skywarp, and he takes advantage of like that Optimus Prime can be a truck, you know? The scale that he shows by having Skywarp then fall down and land on top of a car in the foreground and have that get crushed. That's some really good scale. And artists tend to like draw a lot of Transformers in complete transformation with maybe like some lines in between to imply that something has happened. But Daniel's often comfortable drawing like mid-transformation scenes. And I like that. But that is a great 2-page spread. That's a lot of real estate to give to just, you know, one impact. But I'll just say that, you know, like the previous pages were dealing with like a lot of panels, right? So you're sort of getting used to a certain storytelling, right? Look at that. Look at how many pages have like 5, 6, 7, 8 panels. You're getting used to that. And then all of a sudden you get a 2-page spread. That carries a little bit more weight, in my opinion. I like that decision. We continue with the use of pro wrestling moves in fights, but that's something I feel like I haven't seen a lot of before, so it helps make the action seem a little different than just punches and shots. Optimus Prime rams into Skywarp, lifts him up over his head, spins around and drops him on his head. That's the burning hammer. That's what this move is called in pro wrestling, burning hammer. That's, yep, somebody else recognized it. It's not what you'd expect out of Transformers necessarily. So I like that. Optimus Prime, final thing I want to show. Optimus Prime, they make him both caring and a badass. Optimus Prime's arm basically gets shredded through a variety of things that are happening, right? He's just, his Optimus's right arm is just getting shredded. So that's some great negative space, by the way. Look at how much, like, even without like the other panels of context, you can see like this is Spike. Spike got just shot by a stray bullet. That definitely carries some impact. No more sound effects, lots of like empty space. We're just focusing on the motion of what's happening. Some surprise. An Optimus Prime cares, and now he's desperate to save Spike. So he has to end the fight fast so that he can save him. And this is how I think like he's combined some story to make the character, as both writer and artist, to make Optimus Prime A, caring, empathetic, and therefore we like him, and B, a badass in a fight. So Optimus Prime has to end this fight fast, right? So what does he do? He rips off his own super damaged arm. Again, a 2-page spread. And he just brings it down like a nunchuck or something onto Skywarp. Just hits him with this super heavy, like metal whip to just end the fight then and there. It's pretty badass. And I'm going to stop there because there's more to it. So just, this is issue 3 builds up essentially to a lot of action. And I think it's staged very, very well. I think that there's some really great staging and some great storytelling decisions. It would be one thing for a writer to say Optimus Prime rips off his arm and wins a fight. But an artist may interpret that over 1 page, 2 page, 5 pages. I don't know. It reads well to me how he's staged that. So I wanted to point that out, that these are some really clever storytelling decisions. Sure, that's fair. A flail. That word didn't pop into my head, but that's true. That's what he does. And I just love that, he's doing it. He's motivated to do it, not just to win a fight. He's doing it because it's a desperate move to end a fight fast. He's like, hey, this is damage. I'm going to rip it off and use it as a flail and just try to end things. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I picked up a variant this week that I want to share because I definitely overpaid, folks. This retails for what I paid $15 for this comic. That is not what it should be worth, but that's what it retails for, and I did get it. I don't even like this comic. You've seen me review it, right? I feel like it just doesn't utilize the premise enough. But this is a variant of Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong, and it comes at least in a nice resealable plastic cover, which I appreciate so that I can protect this silly thing. So there's a variant cover, but let's see what happens when I open it. I'm going to open it again just next to the I'm putting it right next to the microphone, okay? Pretty ridiculous. By the way, this technology has obviously existed in greeting cards for a long time. That is not the technology that they use for this. It is not simply a tab that pulls over and triggers the sound effect. No. It has a light sensor here. This is a light sensor. That makes it so much more prone to not working properly, theoretically. Yes. Reminds me of the Arrested Development gag. My name is Judge. Oh, okay. Your name is Judge? Why do you want to say that? My name is Judge. I know. You just told me. Anyway. Yeah, so did I overpay? Absolutely. But it is what it is. Pretty ridiculous. Oh, it did, just to be clear, it it came as a set, so I also got the King Kong one, but what's King Kong's roar? It's not iconic. It just goes like roar. Worth every penny. Do I feel a little silly for getting it? Yeah, I do, in terms of what I paid, but I really like Godzilla. It's such a ridiculous gimmick. It worked on me. Okay, you let's hear it, monkey. All right, fine. All right, I'll open up the King Kong one too. It's not going to be as satisfying. it's a good idea for a gimmick, but this is so okay. So there's what it looks like. Let's open it up. Could you hear that one? I feel like that doesn't even really sound like King Kong. Sounds like a sick Sasquatch. A bit indistinct, right? Oh, yep. Sick elk. What the fuck sound was that? Yeah, it's not as good, right? But Godzilla has an iconic sound. You know, there's some things that have an iconic sound. Godzilla, I mean, King Kong has an iconic look, maybe you could argue, but he doesn't necessarily. I mean, yeah, it's just a roar. There were a couple other things that came out. I will say that Fantastic Four continues to be a very enjoyable and satisfying read in terms of having a good sci-fi mystery of the week for characters to work on, use their powers in an interesting way. The big thing that they come up with this week is the Fantastic Four go up against a guy who's created this really ridiculously powerful AI that's spread across like he's gamified a thing so that everybody has this sort of one game on their phones, and it does predictive modeling on just this massive scale and allows you to predict. You can't predict what an individual does, he says, but you can predict what like a population does over time, and it gives him ways to like predict what things could adjust at. So he's got a potential way to figure out the future. It's very dangerous, and he thinks that he's come up with this great new business, and he thinks that the Fantastic Four will jump in. It's a cool sci-fi idea. It does have a lot of talking, I will say, but you know what? I found it like a legit interesting sci-fi premise. I found it so cool. And of course it goes awry and the Fantastic Four have to work to stop it, but it's really every issue of this just it's either one or maybe two issues at most telling a story. It comes up with a sci-fi idea, which I think works well with the Fantastic Four, and they have to come together and solve it in some sort of innovative way. Ryan North continues to impress me with that. As far as epic fantasy goes, The Sacrificers is the latest book by Rick Remender, art by Max Fiumara, and it continues to build out a fantasy world unlike any that I've seen before. We learn that before this, we knew that gods demanded that the general population sacrifice their firstborn once a generation, and we've learned that there's a guy who can turn young people's like hopes and dreams and fears and aspirations into this elixir that keeps the gods young. But now we find out that like he feels like undervalued by the gods, like that they will never make him a god in return for what he's doing for them. And so in a way, he's like sort of the big villain. And he does some interesting things to upend the order of this world. There's some cool like action adventure stuff. I don't want to give it all away. Yeah. All I'll say is that this is coming up with some interesting world building, but also some concrete world rules for how this fantasy world operates, so that it's not just all like, oh, gods can do anything, like, no, there's some really specific rules for how everything works, and we're still figuring it out. Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything. The last page definitely upends things a bit. Max Fiumara is a really good artist. It's a good fit. It's a really good fit. I like it. And the last thing I picked up was the latest issue of just the regular Batman. I've been told that the better Batman title these days is the Detective Comics one written by Ram V, that he's doing some good detective type stuff. Jim, Sacrificers is so damn good. Man, look for my variant cover coming soon. That's awesome. I did not know that you were doing that. But I've been talking to Rick, and I'm going to try to have him pop up here very soon. So we will see, as long as our schedules can line up, that's going to happen. And I'm going to just have a quick talk with Rick about what kind of stuff he wants to do with the Sacrificers specifically, and with his new imprint giant generator in more broad terms. We will see. So maybe we'll get to learn a little bit more about this variant that Jim has coming up. But that is nice. The only thing I want to point out about the Batman book is I don't love it right now. I think it got sidetracked with that Gotham War storyline, but I do love Jorge Jimenez's art. I think he's a very good artist, very versatile, draws some great action. Let me see if I can find a good close-up of some faces, because I think he does some really good stuff with expressions and stuff like that. I'm trying to see if I can find anything really that stands out. But, you know, to block out something like this, that's not like free-handed. That's using some perspective grids. That probably took quite a bit of time to do something like this. This is all happening in Bruce Wayne's mind. These are all versions of his backup personality, Zur-En-Arrh. He's dealing with that. He's dealing with like this. It's essentially like a controlled dissociative identity disorder that Batman literally created as a plan. But the action's good. The action's strong. Jorge Jimenez is a really good artist. I was hoping that I could find sort of one page or one panel that I could really talk. I guess I just like something like that. Like, that's some good sort of classic dynamic superhero foreshortening and stuff like that. It's having trouble focusing, which would make it a lot more interesting. But there's some nice detail there, you know? It looks like Batman's actually trying. Sometimes people like just draw teeth and it's like shorthand. But I feel like that looks like Batman's really putting in effort. I feel like that there's some real expressions there. I feel like he looks exhausted and drained there, even though he's in really good shape. So I think that there's just some good choices with the art. I will say that. I think that that's probably everything I really need to say about comics this week. I don't think I'm missing anything too big. Yes, absolutely. Frank Miller homage. Each of the Zur-En-Arrhs are sort of based off of previous popular Batmans. We've got an Adam West one. We've got a Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns one. We've got a Michael Keaton one. We've got a Batman Beyond one. Yeah. I haven't been reading Moon Knight. I heard it's pretty good, the Jed McKay version. Well, you can head out, but I'm going to follow you pretty soon. Yeah, there's a part of me that agrees with you here, Rob, which is why I'm not able to fully enjoy this Batman. Is I am a little burned out sometimes on longer storylines when superheroes are not actually being heroic. I'm a little burned out on it, but that could just be me. I've read a lot of comics over the years, so it's not a bad take. It's not a bad take inherently. I'm a little. I think for superheroes, personally, I'm at a point where, and this is why I slightly agreed with that guy, Glenn, the store owner, is the stuff I'm enjoying, and I would hope that he would agree. I don't know, but like 1 to 2 issues, like introducing sort of like a new challenge, a new mystery, and just having like the characters find a way to think of a new way to beat it or a new way to use their powers. I feel like Fantastic Four is doing sort of classic superhero adventuring in a really good way, and I like that. I did pick up the first issue of Zoe Thorogood's Hack Slash because I thought her autobiography book was incredible, and I wanted to see what she did next, but I haven't read it yet. Oops. Can we get a cheers for the late Ian Gibson? Well, I mean, I talked about him for quite a while in the middle there in the news, but yes, absolutely. Ian Gibson was great. Can say it again. He's really, really good. And we're lucky that he leaves behind such a beautiful body of work. If you haven't read his stuff before, my personal recommendation would be to start with The Ballad of Halo Jones. I think The Ballad of Halo Jones is a good jumping on point for understanding his work, and you get a complete story. So that's nice. Yeah, I guess that's it. I will do a show again next week. And then what I just realized that the Monday after that is Christmas Day. Now I'm having family over, so it's pretty unrealistic that I would do a Christmas Day show. Plus, probably most of you are not hanging around watching YouTube, at least not at this same time. So I have to think that through, whether I'll do like an episode on a different night or if we maybe just take a break. But that would also mean that like New Year's Day is the same thing. So I got to think that one through. I guess it depends on how much news and what kind of comics come out, because I probably would want to do a show. I'll probably just have to shift it to a different night or something like that. Thank you for the super chat, Hulkzilla. That's really, really appreciated. That means a lot to me. Thank you. That's so nice. That's super sweet. Give the stream to the cats. Yeah, I'll just turn it on and let my cats entertain you. They're gonna just run around like a bunch of sillies. You know what? I think I'll go play with them and get some dinner. I hope you all have a lovely week. I look forward to seeing you. Oh, and in terms of what I'm doing next for Comic Tropes, I like to give you guys like a little tease, since you're some of my most engaged viewers. I am now working on a video about writer David Michelinie, and without giving anything away, I'll just say that he wrote an important Aquaman story. We've got that Aquaman movie coming out soon, so I wanted to talk about that. But he wrote some stuff I really, really like, and I think he also made some choices that weren't good for Marvel and DC long term. But I'm still writing that essay, so we'll see. But that's some stuff that I'm going to talk about. Probably not a writer anyone expected me to break down like this, but I've got some thoughts. So I think it's worthy of an essay. And then I'll just answer this. Yes, I did get a Hiss tank. I do collect the G.I. Joe classified lines, so I definitely got that. Oh wait, before I go, did I see the trailer for Godzilla vs. Kong? Yeah, I did. It'll probably be fun, but it's a little hard to have gone within like the week of seeing Godzilla Minus Zero, which I'll call just a fantastic movie in general, but definitely an exceptional Godzilla movie, to then going to like Godzilla vs. Kong and you see them just sort of running around and Kong has a power glove now. Tonally, it's very different, but it could be fun. The tank is very impressive. If you guys are curious about that on any level, just today, my friend Hooded Cobra Commander 788 has a great YouTube channel reviewing G.I. Joe figures, and he does an hour-long review of this new Cobra Hiss tank. It's massive. It's got features for days. It's a really interesting review. I definitely recommend it. Anyway, yeah, I think I'll end it there. It was great talking to everybody. Tell you what, double salute, boop, and keep reading comics. I'll see you real soon. Take care.